Hi there, I'm John and welcome back to my YouTube channel. And if you are new here, welcome. I'm John from Nigeria, and on this channel I review books. If you are a fan of like singular book reviews, book hauls, every bookish shenanigans, you'll find them here. And if you also love lengthy written reviews, I write for the website Life on Books. I'm going to put it up here so you can check it out. I write like essay length reviews and more in-depth reviews of some of the things I read here, so you can check that out. But for today, we'll be doing my October and November reading wrap-up. I did not post a wrap-up in October because I read only 2 books and I did not see the use of doing a wrap-up with only 2 books. So I decided to wait for November, and in November I also read only 2 books. So yeah, let's talk about them. The first book I read in October, I already have a review up on the channel. My physical copy is not here with me, but it's The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. Very famous book, famous American classic that's very divisive, but I loved it. I enjoyed how it captured teen angst very perfectly, and I think like the voice in this book, it's one of like the most singular voices I've ever read in fiction, and I can see how it inspired a lot of YA writing of the present day. So I enjoyed this one. I don't want to go too in depth about it, but if you feel like checking out that video, I maybe will link it down below so you can check that out. I have more thoughts on it in that video. So yeah, the only other book I finished in October was Calling a Wolf by Kaveh Akbar, and this is a poetry collection, and it's from the author who wrote like a famous book, a famous 2024 release called Murder, and I'll put maybe the picture here. But I don't want to read this fiction. I did only read the poetry collection because I saw the name from someone's post and was very fascinated by the name, Calling a Wolf. But essentially, it's a collection that looks at a lot of things, from Akbar contemplating his life and his heritage, and like possibly being, I don't know if his family, they are immigrant. I know they are not from the United States, but probably they live in the United States. But I've not checked like his heritage. But looks at immigrant experience, but also looks at personal things like the speaker of the poems being an alcoholic as well, and so many things from love as you expect from these collections. But the parts about the immigrant experience and like alcoholism and dealing with alcoholism, being like a person like that in rehab, is what a lot of those dominates the collection. It's split into 4 parts. But yeah, I really enjoyed like a lot of the poems in the collection. We know that I have been having quite a year with poetry, even though I've not read like a lot. I've read maybe about this was my 3rd one if I'm not mistaken, and I usually have like 1 or 2 in a year. So this was my 3rd one, and I think it was pretty great with everything it talked about. We saw Akbar like contemplating that idea of what it's like to lose your heritage, because we see him explaining how in some poems how he does not necessarily know how to say a lot of words in Arabic. He knows how to say maybe specific simple words. Then we see a point where he describes his father as having lived in the United States so much that he now dreams in English, which I found like some of these like very simple sentences, very simple look at things, like they struck the heart so much. And we know that this is what poetry does. This is what poetry is for. How by little sentences, sometimes simple sentences, sometimes a string of words together, they illuminate it into like very big pictures, very affecting pictures. So I enjoyed a lot of it, and some of the look on alcoholism and desiring change for your life when you have suffered from something like that. There's a line in this poetry collection that has stayed with me, that it's one line and it says, the lesson, it is never too late to become a new thing. And I loved it so much, and I loved so many moments in this collection. Of course, it did not like go above and beyond for me like Oshemfuong's collection did, not to compare, but the moments in here are great. Like the lines in here are striking, they are stunning. Akbar is a writer that you can tell he knows how to use words, and I've heard the fiction is very great, so I'm very excited to read that. So next we move on to November. In November I read 2 books, and the first one was a reread, and it was my number 1 book of last year, What Are You Going Through by Sigrid Nunes. I started this channel after reading this book, like months after reading this book, so I never really talked about it so much in my end of year top books video. But this book follows an unnamed narrator who, there's really no central plot. We follow a woman who kind of shows us different facets of life and how life is people essentially going through something in different spaces. But there's a subplot underneath that I feel is kind of, maybe you can say it's the major plot. But our narrator is asked by a friend to, in summary, help her to die yes, her friend intends to kill herself because she is dying from cancer. So she intends to take this euthanasia drug, and so she enlists the help of this friend. They are both older women, and so she enlists the help of her friend to go through this time. And so the narrator's friend tells our narrator, which is her friend, that she's not going to know the day which she will do it, but she needs somebody to be with her in that time. And so that's kind of like the subplot of the book. So it's all these things that mesh together to make this novel, which I love so much. I've talked about Sigridiness on here so much, and how she shows the human condition and how she shows life to us. And I've said how I think part of why maybe I resonate with her so much, because I read a lot of maybe fiction that surrounds like the young a young person going through something in the world, and but this is an older woman. We do not necessarily get her age, but we do know that from her voice and from, yes, the character traits, and even like things she says about how it's been like 30 years, 40 years since she has known somebody. You tell that she's quite older, yes. And so I think that adds to maybe why I love Secretness as an author, and her eye and her narrative eye so much. This was my first work of hers, and now I've read 3 works of hers, and it's kind of, you get the same thing, but not exactly. You get the same thing in terms of, let's say, the narrative eye, but in the voice there is variety, even though there's similarity also, but there's just the difference in each book. But still, you can just tell this is the same author, and this is when you know that an author, it's not distinctive character voice, but why I love her, it's more distinctive authorial voice. And in this book we see a lot of like these little instances where the narrator is telling us things that she overhears from people, or what somebody told her. She's recounting these events to us. Like, from the beginning, we open with this point where she goes to watch a man give a talk, when she goes to the town to visit where her friend is getting her treatment. She goes there and she goes to watch a man give a talk, and this man is harping on how humanity in general is doomed, is finished, and how we have done everything we have done to ourselves. We have perpetrated so much evil, and we have allowed so much evil to grow in the world. That it's kind of giving this lecture, and in a way saying that he believes that how would people continue having children in the time. And I feel there's so much like little conversations like this, that through like these things she recounts to us, or these things she tells us she's seen, she stirs up these little conversations around like humanity and our existence. And it kind of reminds me of this quote from the poetry collection I talked about, where Kaviakba says so much of living is about understanding scale. And there's so many moments like that in this novel, like so many, sometimes it's little moments, sometimes it's big moments, but in the little or the large, you are seeing life and how it affects people in different ways. Whether it's this woman who is grappling with her cancer and oscillating between wanting to not do chemo and finally deciding to do chemo, and deciding not to do chemo again because she thinks like it is taking too much from her, and she rather spends her time going out on her own terms. And get different looks into kindness, and from the narrator, of course, there's the look of what it means to offer kindness to a person. But in this case, it is such a specific type of kindness that's why I think I have always found it as such an important book to me, because we see a woman who decides that this is like a big ask from a friend. She had asked people who had refused, the friend who is dying, but her narrator agrees to do it, even though it seems so crazy. And you wonder, you do not want to ask, is this right or is this wrong? But you wonder how much is in her heart that she decides to say yes to this kind of request and be there for her friend through the time. And what is even more striking for me is that we learned that the narrator and this woman who is dying, they were friends and they were roommates at some point in life, but they lost connection for some years. And so it's not like it's that very tight, close friendship. It's not like they have known each other a long time, but it's not like I've known you my whole life, I've loved you my whole life. And so you wonder how she's able to still go out of her way to do this for a friend. And it's just so many little instances of life we see like this, that I think this is one of the greatest books I've ever read. It's one of the most important books I've ever read. I put it on that video that it changed my life. And sometimes I like to reevaluate like these books I signal as books that kind of change things for me, and there are only like 7 of them, and this was one of the 7, and I strongly stand by it because I just see the world so much clearer. And yes, we are flawed human beings, but then there's so much more empathy that we can have, that I think this book flooded my eyes with, in terms of how you can love human beings, how you can empathize with the world, even with terrible people. Even in terrible cases, we see a mother who is at war with her child and she has never had a great relationship with her child. We see a woman who is dying and she thinks from observation that her husband is celebrating that she's dying because they have not had the best relationship so far. It's so many human moments in this novel. Please, if you have not read Secret Illness, I don't know if I'm doing her justice, but I recommend her to you. I recommend the entirety of her works to you, even though I personally have not read them. But I started out here and it's my favorite one of hers, but I do think there's something in all of her works. You'll probably see her in my year-end list. I'm just giving a disclaimer now, but I love this novel. I recommend it. And the final book I read last month, final book I finished, was Matilda by Roald Dahl, and this is a children's classic, a very famous one, and has like some adaptations too. But yeah, this I bought for my sister to read and she has read it, finished it, and so I borrowed it from her when I went home back in October, just to, because I found it was short. It somehow ended up taking me over a month to read, even though it literally has like pictures in it. It has a lot of illustration that takes up like spaces in the book, so you don't expect it to like take so much time, but a lot of laziness, I guess. But yeah, this book follows Matilda, a very small girl who has so much big brain power, and follow Matilda as she learns how to read at age, I think 4.5. She learns how to read at 4.5, and she's reading major classics, she's reading big works of literature. She falls in love with reading, and it kind of takes her out of her life where her parents are not the very best, and tackles some bullying in this novel when she eventually goes on to school and she encounters this headmistress who is very terrible. The headmistress of the school she falls into is a witch. In terms, you can say she's a witch because of how wicked and evil she is. But I enjoyed this to an extent, but I'm not going to talk about it too much because I intend to put a separate video on it, funny enough, because I kind of have some thoughts on it as a children's classic, and not to say I see maybe why children like it. I did not love it something, but I know I'm not the target audience, of course, and yes, but I just still have some thoughts, even from the respect of looking at how like children will take this book. But I think it also has a lot of humor in it also, and I see there's a lot that you can tell children will enjoy from it when they eventually read it. But yeah, Matilda, I think it's decent work. It's not maybe my favorite thing, and I know I don't want it to come off as strange that why would I speak like that on a children's book. I have reservations about it that I do not want to talk about here because I want that to be a separate video that will try not to make it too long. But yeah, that might be my next video, so we'll see. But overall, those were the 4 books I finished in October and November, and yeah, we are approaching the end of the year. Everyone is trying to smuggle in everything to reach their reading goal. For some are trying to round out what they have not finished, and some are trying to get in specific books before the end of the year. I am in all 3 of those camps because I would love to reach my reading goal. I'm not there yet. I'm not too far off, but I'm not too close either. But yeah, happy new month. I hope you guys have a lovely December. Please let me know what you are reading and what you intend to finish before the year in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe. And I thank you all for the 1 year so far. I did not do a separate video and I have not been too well since my graduation, so it's been a lot for me, but I'm here again. And yeah, thank you all for the wishes, and also thank you for the past year on BookTube. I have had the time of my life. I have loved every second of it, and I want to grow bigger, but I'm content with how it has been moving and how more people have been finding my videos. So if you have shared and if you have been a constant watcher since the beginning, if you are new, thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.